So my name is Liz Lazar-Johnson. I'm the executive director of Via Heart Project. We're a nonprofit organization based in the Bay Area, and we manage AED programs worldwide. We do this for corporations in 26 different countries, and we manage AEDs in schools, most of them in California. We also do heart screenings on kids to find previously undetected heart defects.
So what motivated you to start the Via Heart Project?
I've been working with AEDs since about 2004, and I met a lot of families that had lost children to cardiac arrest, and I met a lot of survivors that had survived cardiac arrest just because they happened to have their cardiac arrest near an AED, had a bystander perform CPR. They were very lucky. It's a very small percentage that survive cardiac arrest, about 10 in 100 people survive. So I met all these amazing people that had either lost children to cardiac arrest and had gone on to try and make sure that didn't happen to other parents' children by starting their own foundations and trying to donate out AEDs and trying to teach CPR, do heart screenings. And I also found survivors, which really motivated me. I found my passion through just meeting people, and I decided to start the nonprofit in 2010 with the sole intention of providing maintenance for those AEDs that the other parent groups had placed out there. Because I had had so much experience placing AEDs and knew how to maintain them, knew how to make them sure they were compliant with that state's health and safety code. It was something that we specialized in at first, and after 5 years, we started doing heart screenings as well. So we had so many AEDs in the schools because of our school program. We manage about 800 in schools in California. And we were treating cardiac arrest on the school campus by having the AEDs there and teaching the faculty CPR. But we decided to also do a prevention portion of that. So the treatment portion with having the AEDs there and prevention by finding the heart defects before they lead to cardiac arrest.
So specifically, how does the increased screening and AED placement reduce the risk of sudden cardiac death in young people?
Well, by placing an AED on a school campus, you're covering 20% of that population. So the studies have shown 20% of a community's population is on a school campus on a daily basis. So just by having coverage on that school campus, we're protecting 20% of the people in that community. But that's not, they're only there a few hours a day. They're not there every day, all day. So finding heart defects before they lead to cardiac arrest in our youth, and sometimes they don't necessarily go into cardiac arrest if they have a heart defect before they're 18. Sometimes it can be when they're 40 or 50 years old. And by that time, they've passed on that genetic issue to their offspring, and they don't know that they have it. So it keeps going. It keeps, different generations will be passed on this genetic defect. And sometimes it's somebody can drown or get in a car wreck and they think they fell asleep at the wheel when it's really cardiac arrest. So sometimes it's unknown the cause of death, but it's too late. They've passed it on.
Sadly. Yeah. Do you think pre-participation screening should be mandatory for all student athletes and even those not experiencing symptoms?
I do. In our heart screenings, we've screened over 5,000 kids now in 5 years, and we've found over 50 of them that have heart defects, and I don't think any one of them had any previous signs or symptoms. None of them had ever seen a cardiologist before for it. Sometimes there's signs and symptoms that they don't know is cardiac is a sign of having a heart defect. Like a child can have heart flutters or get dizzy after exercise or get really winded with exercise more so than they should. I've had parents chalk it up to high anxiety. My kids have high anxiety. Turns out, no, your kid has long QT syndrome, and that's why their heart races like that. So sometimes there are signs and symptoms, but parents and teachers and kids, they don't know what they are. They don't know that if a child passes out for no reason, that's probably a heart defect. They just attribute it to maybe it was dehydration or something. So there's very few kids that we screen that we find with heart defects that had any signs and symptoms whatsoever. So I think it's important. I think, I have a daughter, and when she starts into sports, I would want, as a parent, to make sure that her heart was okay when she's going and doing these, really aggressive, high impact, your heart rate zooms up there, with middle school and high school athletes. So I think any parent out there would want that.
And so I understand that through the Via Heart Project, you have received support to place over 2,500 AEDs in more than 25 countries. And so what are some other methods that are being implemented to reduce the risk of sudden cardiac death through your organization?
Well, definitely placing AEDs and teaching CPR is one of them. And then not just placing AEDs, but making sure they're fully compliant. So one of the issues some people have is they'll buy an AED, throw it in a principal's office somewhere, or stick it in a file cabinet and forget about it. And what they don't know is that maybe the pads expire every 2 years and need replacing. And 3 years later, somebody goes into cardiac arrest. If they even know where the AED is, they go get it, and then the pads are expired and the AED may not work. Mm-hmm. And that makes them more liable. What we don't want is somebody to be more liable by having an AED on the school campus. So we want to reduce that liability to make sure they're compliant with the state and local regulations, and also make sure that the AED is fully ready to use at any moment. So that's really our goal. And by doing that, making sure people know where the AED is, making sure it's ready for use at any moment, making sure they're fully compliant. So if there was ever an issue, say nobody used the AED, they wouldn't be held liable for having one at their facility. And by doing those things, we can ensure that the AEDs will get used out there as much as possible, and that we can get as many out there as possible too, because that kind of alleviates that fear of liability from the owner of that business or building.
Mm-hmm. So my last question for you is, can you tell me about some volunteer opportunities in your organization that don't require any medical background for people that are interested?
Yeah, so we do heart screenings 4 times a year in Northern California, and we have about 100 to 150 volunteers at every screening. Now, many of those are medical volunteers. We have nursing students, EMT students, firemen, nurses, cardiologists, etc. But some of the positions that we have for our events are non-medical. So working the registration table, or being a greeter and showing people the right way to go, or working the checkout table, that type of thing. And we can also use volunteers in our office for helping, we have all these records that we need filed, we have stuff like that. So we always take volunteers for those things too, very gladly.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's amazing what you are doing. A lot of people are benefiting from it. And so yeah, those are all the questions I had for you. Thank you so much for your time. I greatly appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Goodbye.
Bye.